Everyone has a money story. What is a money story, you ask? It is the experiences of your past that determine your views in relationship with money. Danya Karram's money story began early in her life, watching her single mother try to manage the family finances. Its impact made her not only want to learn about finance, but to be forever financially independent. Danya wants to ensure her clients write their own successful money story. Hear her practical tips and advice in this next episode. Health, wellness, career, family, life, and the better side of 50. I'm your host, Michelle Folan, and this is Asking for a Friend. The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only. The information is not to be considered personal advice. If you need personal financial advice, please seek help from a qualified financial professional who can consider your unique financial circumstances. Hello, listeners. Welcome to the first episode of Asking for a Friend. I'm very excited today. Our guest is Danya Karram. She is a certified financial planner and the principal and co-founder of Brilliant Advice. She specializes in working with baby boomers, business owners. She does divorce planning, and very importantly, women's financial planning issues. Welcome, Danya.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm just pleased to be here and honored to be your first guest on Asking for a Friend. Yeah.
I'm so excited. Danya and I spoke, a year ago when I was planning on doing this podcast. And after speaking with her, she's so dynamic and has so much information for women our age. You were a natural choice to have on the show. So thank you so much for being here. And I was hoping you could share with the listeners a little bit about your background, because you haven't always been a wealth manager.
That is correct. I have gone through what I call my career maze, and I hope this will resonate with some of your listeners because I didn't do the traditional path. To try to give you the highlights here, I graduated from college and I did go the corporate route, and I had a degree in accounting, but I knew that was not something I wanted to go into full time. I worked in accounting for a few months and decided it was just a little bit too to myself and at a desk, and I liked people. So anyway, I did a corporate stint. I liked that. I ended up getting married, starting a family, and then I supported my career husband, and I took some time off to raise my kids. I say I took some time off, but I tried to do things a little differently, and that I knew I wanted to go back to work. So I knew it was imperative that I keep my skill set high so that I could enter the job market eventually. So I stayed very active in our community. I did some part-time gigs. I did all kinds of things. And because I did all kinds of different things, from running small businesses to starting my own businesses a few times and dabbling in a lot of arenas, I ended up going back to my finance and accounting and numbers. At the end of the day, I realized I love to help people and I want to help women. I have a story that I grew up in a family where my father decided he wanted a different life than being at home with his wife and kids. And that left my mother in the 60s with 3 small children. While we were well supported, those days alimony was sufficient to support the stay-at-home mom, my mother had to figure out how to do everything on her own. And my sister and I realized that we never wanted to be in that situation. So from 2 perspectives, number 1, I never wanted to be fully dependent upon a man, or anyone for that matter, because you never know where life is going to take you, what twists and turns may occur, divorce, death, disability, all kinds of things. So number 1, I didn't want to be financially completely dependent. Number 2, I wanted to help women so they wouldn't be in that position. So that's how I found myself in this career path, which I absolutely love. It's my passion, and I'm thrilled that I finally found it. But it took lots of twists and turns to get there.
Okay. We love career pivots. And I also love the fact that you realized at a young age you didn't want to have to be dependent on someone else. That's a similar message I've given my own children, and I hope that's resonated with them. We all hope that they listen to us, but you just never know what the future has to hold. When you're working with your clients, we talked about the fact that you do work with a lot of women, you do divorce planning. What are the questions you get most often when you get started with a client?
The number one question we get across the board, men and women at all ages in life, is, am I going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? You know, there's this idea that we work really hard, we plan for our future, but we never really know at the end of the day if we're doing the correct planning, if we'll have enough, if we will be able to retire when we want to, if we'll be able to withstand an unfortunate circumstance in our lives. It's usually not in numbers. It's not how much money do I need to save. It's more of a feeling question. It's a behavioral. It really hits the gut. Am I going to be okay? I think that's what we all want, is certainty. And while I can't promise certainty, none of us can. What we try to do in our planning is we look at different circumstances and scenarios and try to play out maybe the way, some ways that your future may play out. And then how do we build towards that? So that's the question. Am I going to be okay?
Well, and we're living longer too. So that adds a whole nother complexity to the question.
Absolutely. We're living longer. Oftentimes we want to work longer, but sometimes we're not given that opportunity. So that creates a lot of uncertainty too. We know we want to work, but will we be able to work? Will we be physically, mentally able to work? And will the jobs be available for us in our specific career?
You do work with women who are, you said, divorce planning. What do those conversations look like typically?
Well, I'll clarify that I used to do divorce planning in that I worked with women going through divorce and working with the attorneys to decide and figure out spousal support, child support, and division of assets. I don't do that particular line of work any longer. I can't in what I do now. But what I do is I help women after they've gotten their divorce, or maybe they're going through it, and I'm helping them on the side, one-on-one, but not through their attorneys any longer. So it's very challenging work. But the biggest issue for women, especially those that are reliant on spousal support and child support to live, who've not been the major breadwinner, to make sure that whatever assets they get from their divorce, that they are invested wisely, and we do planning for them to make sure that they have enough to live on. Because oftentimes the spouse that is not the primary breadwinner doesn't come out with the assets that they hope to. So it's some career planning, going back to work, how much money do I need to make? Can I keep my house? Do I need to sell my house? What type of home, or should I rent? All those questions come up. It's really financial planning, budgeting, trying to set forth a path to give certainty, to give some comfort that you'll be okay.
If you're talking to a single female and she is 50 years old and they say, my goal is to retire at 65. What advice are you giving people today that will help prepare them to be able to do that?
So every situation's different, right? It depends on the lifestyle that you want during retirement. I would say the first thing I would tell someone who comes in that 50th age bracket is to get online to the Social Security website. Make sure you've established an account. It's ssa.gov, and you'll be able to see your Social Security record. If you've worked, you have a work record. And basically that means over your lifespan, you've worked approximately 10 years. And see what your Social Security benefit would be. So start there. Find out how much you will be receiving per month from Social Security when you hit your full retirement age, which is about 67. Then I would look at what you have in your 401k and your savings, IRAs, bank accounts, and get a total of what you have in your assets today. look at what you spend today and then decide, is that what I want to do in retirement? Is my goal to spend the same amount during retirement? And then see if you have enough to get you there. And if you don't have enough, understand how much you have to save to get you there. So it's a constant set of trade-offs. It's discussions. You get to design your retirement. It's often partially designed by what you have as far as assets go. But depending on how old you are and how far you are away from your retirement, you do have some decisions you can make. You can save more. You can cut back your lifestyle today so that you can then retire earlier at a later date. So it's a very in-depth conversation. There's not one easy answer. It depends on what you want your retirement, you hope that it would look like, and then how do we get you there?
That was one of the crystal ball questions I had for you, because one of my friends said, hey, ask Danya this. Is Social Security going to run out in our lifetime? Because everybody's a little concerned about that.
That is a question that comes up all the time. Very good question. And for good reason it comes up. It is a substantial part of most people's retirement income, especially if you're married and you have two benefit amounts. And Social Security can be extremely complex, so I understand why there are a lot of questions around it. There's a short and long answer. And you will learn, and when you speak with a financial advisor, the answer you typically get is, it depends. So it depends on how old you are. If you are close to retirement age, right now in your 60s, most likely your Social Security benefit will be there for you. If you're in your 50s, it may be a little less. If you're in your 40s, I don't really know what's going to happen. But I can tell you a few things. There are ways that the government can make Social Security work. They typically don't pull that trigger until they're pushed against a wall. And they've had to do that in the past. They've had to fund Social Security benefits in the past. So there will be probably changes. They may change the full retirement age to age 70. They may move it up. Right now it's 67 for most people, 66 to 67. They may move it up to 70. They may have an income cap that if you make a certain amount, more of it would be taxed. Right now, for most people, 85% of your Social Security benefits are taxed. That means 15% is not taxed. They make that 100%. So there are lots of little changes that can come along the way, and most likely will come along the way. If you have a lot of assets, a high wage earner, you're probably going to see more changes than someone that's in the lower brackets. But yes and no. Most likely it'll be there in some form. But however, if you have more assets, that means it's a smaller part of your retirement income. So it won't have as much of an impact.
Okay.
But there's no way. People have been, planning on Social Security benefits. There's no way that anyone can make those changes for people that are in their 60s, most likely 50s. That would be political suicide.
Yeah. And that was one of the comments one of my friends made. She was saying, I know a lot of people that are really counting on that Social Security because they haven't planned. I mean, if you're already 58, like I am, and you were depending on that, I mean, there's no quick fix, right? Because we were all supposed to start saving and putting money in our 401k when we were 22 years old and out of college. But I bet you know people that didn't do that.
Right. That's exactly right. And, the reason Social Security has a very interesting history, I don't want to spend a lot of time in it, but at one point, the only person that got the benefits was the wage earner. Then they realized that the wage earner would die, typically the husband, and the woman was left with nothing. That's when the spousal benefit came into play. So, our government's been very good about making adaptations to the needs of the population. So we have to hope and pray that that will be the case going forward. No government wants to see people starving in the streets. So I think something will be there.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. I'll let her know.
Okay.
Another question that I got was, where's the safest place to park cash? If you're feeling a little squeamish about the market right now, other than your bank account, where would you recommend putting cash?
Okay, so I'm going to use my same answer. It depends, right? So it depends on your circumstances. It's very hard for me to give. Everybody wants a one-line answer for every question, but it's just not that simple. It's much more nuanced. Anyone that gives you one answer, this is where you put your cash, question that, okay? So it depends on what you need the cash for. If this is a short-term need and you need your cash in the next year and maybe up to 2 years and you're concerned about the volatility, for example, you'll be needing to buy a car, or you'll be wanting to buy a home or fund a child's education or your education, that cash needs to be readily available to you, or your emergency fund. So probably the bank is probably your best place to put it. If this is a long-term amount of money, so money that you're not going to touch and it's for retirement, and let's say you're in your 40s or your 50s and it's for retirement, so it's good 15, 20 years down the road that you'll need it, that's a different question. And I would then say what you hear all financial advisors say is that volatility is your friend. Invest it because you are now buying low. That's the goal in any asset. Buy low, sell high. It sounds great, but it's really hard when there's a lot of market volatility and you say, okay, I'm going to put my $20,000 in the market and tomorrow it goes down to $15,000 or $10,000, God forbid, or $5,000. There's a pit in your stomach. But if the markets act the way the markets have typically acted over time, they go up. You know what the market was just a few weeks ago and where it is today, right? The people that took their money out are probably sorry that they did. You're typically sorry when you take it out. So volatility is your friend when it's a long-term investment. Volatility is not your friend when it's a short-term need. So if it's money you need, just to recap, within the next year, year and a half, keep it in cash. Keep it in your bank account accessible to you because you don't want to invest it and then have to pull it out and have lost money. If it's a long-term need, 5 years, 10 years, 15, it makes sense to invest it. Now, investing is a catch-all word. I wouldn't say go invest it in one stock, but in a diversified portfolio that if there are things that go down, fine, there are plenty of things that go up. So don't go buy one thing, okay? Don't put it all in one stock, but put it in a diversified ETF, low-cost fund, something that will spread your risk over time.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
One question I got too was Roth 401k or traditional 401k?
Okay, since you're asking for a friend, tell your friend, it depends, okay? Again, it totally depends. So a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA would be pre-tax dollars going in, meaning that the money comes out of your check, it's not taxed, it goes into your 401k. When you retire at the age of 59 and a half under today's laws, you can start pulling that money out and then you're taxed on it, just like you're taxed as income. So you would take out, $30,000 a year, you're taxed just at your income rate at that time. So what happens is when you're putting money away for retirement is you're basically kicking the tax can down the road. I'm going to put money away today because I'm in a high tax bracket. And then when I pull it out, when I'm retired, I should technically be in a lower tax bracket. So therefore, I'll pay less taxes on it. That's kind of the old way of looking at it. But it's more complicated than that, okay? So it's a little bit of a tax game. You're also deferring any money that you make on those investments. You're deferring the tax on your gains, okay? So that's called a traditional 401k. A Roth 401k, this only pertains to the employee, your contribution, okay, amount, goes into what's called a Roth IRA or 401k. There's a Roth IRA too, meaning that you pay taxes on that and then you put it in a Roth 401k, meaning that then you pay taxes on it, so it's after-tax money. The growth, okay, is not taxed. When you take it out, it's never taxed again, okay?
Got it. Okay.
If you're in a low tax bracket now, if you're younger, for most younger people who are in a low tax bracket, we often will suggest that you go put your portion in a Roth 401k because most likely your taxes are going to be higher as you get older. So don't pay taxes when you get older. This gets complicated, and there are so many different types of retirement accounts. It gets extremely complicated, but it really depends on how much you're making. It's more of a tax related question.
Got it.
So when we do wealth management, we not only talk about your investments, but we talk about tax planning as well, because your investments are taxed.
Yes.
Right? Anything you make money on is taxed, even your house, whatever you sell, it's taxed. So tax planning is part of the discussion. And it, again, depends. Your age, your goals, your income, all of these answers come into play as we're trying to figure out what's best for you. This gets really complicated and deep really quickly.
Well, I know, but this is why you have great job security. People need this advice, and this is why I have you on today. This is important stuff.
Okay, good. It is.
I know you're not necessarily in the insurance world, but I have friends right now that are starting to purchase long-term care insurance. And I know it can be really expensive. Do you put your money there or do you invest it? Because I know some of these plans are super, super expensive, and people are really kind of on the fence about whether to buy one of these long-term care plans.
That's a really good question. It comes up all the time because it's, again, so complicated. So a little bit of the history. The first long-term care plans that came out were really good. Baby plans that our parents had. And they were expensive, but not terribly expensive. And what happened is they were not priced properly, okay? Because at the same time, people were living longer. Our healthcare costs have gone up. They've gone up at least 6% a year. And long-term care facility expenses have gone up. So a lot of those plans were really good, but they ended up, the companies either went out of business, okay, because they couldn't support the plans, or they got rid of those plans. So what happened was, and why your friends, everyone that you're talking to is saying they're so expensive, is because they had to be repriced. So now they're priced according to really what their costs are, because insurance companies are not nonprofits. They're in the business of making money, right? It's all about risk and risk assessment. So they had to reprice things, which made it more complicated now for the buyer. So here are the situations you're looking at. If you are a lower income, I want to say fewer assets, many people go into long-term care facilities under Medicaid. Okay? So if you don't really have many assets, you can go to a care facility. In your bed, your room would be next to someone who's paying full price. So there are quite a few people, depending on their asset levels, looking at, okay, Medicaid may be an option for my parents or for me, because I can't pay for it out of pocket and I can't afford the premiums.
Okay.
So that is one scenario that people are using. There are rules around that because people try to abuse that system. So there's what's called, for example, a 5-year look back rule. So I can't, if I manage my mother's assets, let's say, it's, give all your assets to the kids, and then all of a sudden you'll have nothing, and then we can, put you in a facility under Medicare.
Oh, okay.
A Medicaid. People try to do that. Well, there's a 5-year look back. You can't have gotten rid of assets within the last 5 years, okay? Because there is a lot of abuse.
It's a great idea, though.
For some families, it is the saving grace because they don't have the wherewithal to pay for it. It's extremely expensive. In our area, for full-time nursing care, it can easily be $80,000 a year and up, okay? That's a real factor. So Medicaid is an important part of our system. It is taking care of a lot of our elderly, okay? Then the other extreme is you self-fund your long-term care needs. You have enough assets that we know that for the average person, a long-term healthcare stay is about 3 years. It can go up much higher, but the average stay is about 3. And if you right now look at it at about $80,000 to $100,000 a year, you may have enough assets that you can self-fund. And many people do that. Then we go to the next step, which would be having a long-term care policy, which again costs you a lot of money. The younger you are, the cheaper it is, but the longer you'll probably have to pay that policy, until you need it. But there are also hybrid policies. I don't sell insurance. I don't sell anything. I only give advice. I would say if you're looking for long-term care insurance, you would go to someone who would put some packages together for you. There are now policies that combine long-term care insurance with life insurance. And they can get complicated. I would, sit down with someone and make sure that I fully understand what is covered. The insurance industry realized that they had to make this more affordable. Another thing is you can partially fund your long-term care insurance. You don't have to take out a policy for the full amount, but maybe a partial amount, and then you would supplement it with your own money. You may not even need it. One thing that people do not understand is they think when they go on Medicare at the age of 65 for healthcare, they think that Medicare covers long-term care. It doesn't. It does cover some needs for rehab after maybe a surgery, but it on whole does not cover any long-term care or assisted living. That is probably one of the most misunderstood points about Medicare.
Okay. I know when my parents got older, they had supplemental insurance too, which helped cover anything that their Medicare didn't cover. But that still does not cover.
That's not long-term care,
Right?
right? And supplemental or Advantage plan or supplemental, most people that are on Medicare will have, because Medicare really only covers really hospital stays and some testing, but you have to have a supplemental Advantage plan, one of the other plans to supplement your Medicare, unless you're on Medicaid, low income.
Okay. Great advice. Thank you.
It's complicated stuff.
I know, but you know what? We got to make heads or tails of this stuff sometime. We can't keep our heads in the sand.
That's right.
And speaking of heads in the sand, I have to bring this up. I have a feeling there are a lot of women out there that have no clue how much money they have as a couple and where that money is. And I was wondering if you could provide some advice on how women get a little more financial acumen in terms of their own situation.
I would say you're 100% right. Unfortunately, it's not just women over the age of 50 or 60. I'm finding the same thing with younger women. I really thought that younger women who went the career path before they stayed home with kids or took that option would stay involved with finances, but on a whole, they don't. That's concerning to me. Your future, what money does and what information does is it gives you options, it gives you choices. And I don't know anyone that would ever say, I don't want options, I don't want choices. I want someone to, take charge of my life. We all want to have some sort of independence, whether we're young, middle-aged, older, whatever. Independence is part of the human experience. Understanding your finances is a key to having independence because it gives you may be able to drive, go anywhere you want, but if you don't have the resources to live, it's really going to change your life. It doesn't give you certainty. It doesn't give you security. I grew up in an age with a mother who said, I don't know how to do math. I don't do math. I don't like math. And I took it upon myself to say, again, after watching what my mother went through, that's not going to be me. So I took every math class I could possibly take because I knew, again, I saw firsthand the situation she was in. She did nothing wrong at all. And she just didn't have a handle on her finances, didn't understand it. Okay, so let's go back to what can women do? A lot of it depends on your partner in life. And if you sit down with your partner, and let's say in everything we do, in most of our households, there is a division of labor. So it's really quite understandable that one would say, I'll take care of the finances, and the other will say, I'll take care of, the household duties. So that's being extremely traditional. But I know women that have taken care of the finances, and the men have picked up more childcare. So it's not necessarily a male-female thing. But what I would say is the best partnerships that set you up best for life is if you do it together, if you share responsibilities. There was a period in my life where I didn't have a handle on the finances like I normally had, but I was so busy with two small children and a spouse that was working 80 hours a week that I couldn't physically do it all. But we, at least every quarter, often more than that, had conversations. Okay, I would say, get me up to speed. Where are we with our savings? We would sit down and have a discussion. I wasn't doing the day-to-day check writing. I do now, but I wasn't at that point. But we had these conversations. It's about having conversations, and it's about scheduling those conversations. Because for most of us, it doesn't happen. If there's something we don't enjoy doing and don't want to do, we don't do it. So it's a long, circular answer to a complicated question. We don't all want to pay attention to our nutrition or our exercise, but we do because we know it will give us a better quality of life as we get older. We don't all want to look at our bank account and our investment accounts, but we have to because it'll give us a better quality of life as we approach retirement. So maybe it's not fun, but it has to be done. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And how often should we be meeting with our financial planner as a couple? Obviously, we'd be working with a wealth manager. As a couple, how often should we be making those appointments to sit down and review everything?
So let's pull back a little bit. And not everyone is able to work with a financial planner or a wealth manager. And not every financial advisor out there is a wealth manager or a financial planner. In the industry, in the finance industry, there are a wide variety of people with different skill sets and have different offerings. Unfortunately, it's really difficult for the consumer to understand what people do and what they're good at. So at the most basic level, when you're coming out of school and you're starting in your first job in your 20s and 30s, the most important thing you can do is be saving into your employer retirement plan, your 401k. If you are not eligible for a 401k, there are IRAs or other ways to save for retirement. 401k through a corporation, a company, is the best way to do it. It allows you to save. It allows you to pick funds, oftentimes based on your age. That is the basic entry point. They often have calculators on their websites that will tell you if you save so much, this is what you'll have as you get older. So it'll give you a little bit of a window into the future. So that is pretty much open to anyone who's involved in a 401k. If you do not have a 401k and you want to have a retirement plan, you can go to Fidelity or Schwab or TD Ameritrade or Vanguard, and you can open up an IRA. Again, you can choose investment funds based on retirement, hopeful retirement age. That'll help you along the way. It's not financial planning. That's your first walk through the door. Oftentimes people when they're younger will go to an insurance agent because they need insurance. They start a family, they want to get life insurance. And sometimes your insurance person will do some financial planning. I would say just be cognizant of anyone that sells any products because they're there to sell you a product. When you go to a car lot to look at cars, this car salesman isn't going to sit there and say, well, maybe you don't need a car. Maybe you can't afford a car. Maybe you should be taking public transportation.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They're there to sell you a car. So if you go, right, if you go to someone who sells a product or sells insurance, they're there to answer your needs or fill your needs with their product offering. But after your company 401k, that is usually your first exposure to someone who does some planning. But they'll often be selling products, life insurance, annuities, things like that. Often things that you may not need, but those are the tools in their toolbox. As you gain assets of savings, you may be able to work then with a financial advisor at one of the big firms, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, UBS, etc. Again, they are brokers. They're broker dealers, meaning that they are there to sell you products, to put you in investments. There are two standards in the industry. There's a fiduciary standard, which I might work under, and there's a suitability standard. Most of them work under what's a suitability standard. I'll use the car example again. I'm not there to tell you you don't need a car. I'm there to say, okay, here's our offerings and which ones sound good to you. So just be cognizant of who you're dealing with and what their responsibility is to you. So that's how a lot of people start out. As you acquire more assets, you may be able to then work with a certified financial planner or someone who's a wealth advisor. Oftentimes, the firms that have these practices, you have to have a minimum $500 $1,000 minimum, $1 million minimum, $10 million minimum. So what happens is the really good advice really only comes when you have assets, enough assets to afford them. And that's really a shame, because you need the advice when you're younger so that you can get to that asset level, right?
Right. Oh my gosh.
It's so messed up. It's so unbelievably unfair and messed up. But unfortunately, that's the system. That's the system that we live in. So I would say be aware, ask good questions. If anyone's interested, I have a list that I could email someone that tells you what types of questions to ask someone that you're speaking with to interview as a financial advisor, so that you understand who you're dealing with and what the responsibility is to you. I am a fiduciary. I'm held to a fiduciary standard. I can only do what's in your best interest. I can't do what's in my best interest. That's why I can't sell anything. I find that is the best case scenario for the client. If you ask me what we did wrong years ago, I didn't understand that. I didn't know about the differences. And we worked with people that maybe were not directly aligned with our goals and needs.
Right.
That may have been putting theirs first instead of ours. It's hard to know because everybody says they're financial advisors, wealth advisors. They use the same terminology. Most of them, if you ask them, are you going to do what's in my best interest? Of course they're going to say yes.
Right.
But look at the system that they operate under and look at what their incentives are. And if their incentives are to sell you products, well, guess what? Just like the car salesman, their incentive is to sell you as many cars that month so they can win the top salesman award.
It makes total sense.
Financial institutions do the same thing. I'm not saying there's right or wrong, just most people don't know the differences.
What I'll do is I'll put your contact information in the show notes. That way, if people want to get that list of questions to ask, they can reach out to you if that's okay.
Yeah. I'll just give another plug. This is something free on our website for anyone to go in and download. Our website is www.brilliantadvice.net. But we have financial guides for every decade of your life. So we have 3 different guides for different periods of your life, 20s and 30s, 40s and 50s, and 60 and up. And it gives a checklist of the things that you should be doing and ways that you can be saving and making sure that you are covered properly for insurance, things like that. Just good free advice. I encourage anyone to go in and just download those guides, and hopefully they'll help you set you on your path.
Great. Thank you so much. We're getting towards the end of our time, and I wanted to ask one final question of you. What's the one thing you wish people realized about their personal finances?
I would say that your finances are directly linked to your future, as I mentioned earlier. It's hard to have a future without having financial stability and financial certainty, security. So why would you put your future in someone else's hands? Therefore, why would you put your finances in someone else's hands? If you want to dictate your life, then your finances have to be a part of it.
I agree. And I love what you had said before about, we eat well, we try to make sure we're healthy, but we have to make sure our finances are healthy as well.
Absolutely.
Danya, thank you so much. This was very informative and I think much needed for this age group. And we may have to do round 2 because I probably will have more questions for you down the road after this session.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
I'd love to. You're quite welcome. And again, any friends that are asking questions, send in my way. I'll be happy to address them via email.
Thank you so much, Danya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Follow Asking for a Friend on social media outlets and provide a review and share this show wherever you get your podcasts. Reviews and sharing help us grow.